stand and join us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, with that, I'll make a motion that we approve the meeting agenda as stated tonight. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mrs. Wood. Any discussion on the agenda? All those in favor? It's unanimous, thank you. All right, since there are no blue cards, we'll dispense with the community open forum and move into special presentations. For those in the audience, you are in for a great night. We now have not one, not two, but three. So we're going to start, I believe, with King and King.
Yes. I'm saving mine for after.
Oh,
Thank you for all the teachers that came. Go ahead, sir.
And I promised that I would preface this presentation with another reminder, both for the audience and for the board. So we will likely have a lot of questions on what's about to be reviewed, most of which we will discuss next meeting in executive session because it's safety and security and it has to do with procedures and what we'll be doing to our buildings to make them more secure. It is not public information, and so I don't want anyone that might be watching this to think that the board is not engaged or wanting to ask questions, but most of them we can't ask in open session. But with that, turn it over to you, Kurt.
great. Good to see everyone. I'm probably going to move around a little bit, so if you can't hear me, let me know. So this capital project that we're going to present tonight is really a culmination of a series of events that started with a conversation and some public forums that we had last year regarding school safety. And from
Why don't we just, and I hate to interrupt you, if you use that mic, then the people can hear you when they're watching. We have like 48 different countries that tune into these, and we don't want to have it without.
well, I can only do German, French, and English.
We
So.
put subtitles. That's three more than that.
All right, is that better? So, yes?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we started with identifying work, physical assessments of the buildings related to those conversations that we had in those public forums. And out of that, what we wanted to do is address in a prioritized fashion those elements that we would recommend to be done at each of the buildings related to work that we've done in other districts across the state and conversations that are ongoing across the nation regarding school safety. So one of those elements in item 2 is to specifically address kind of the entrance and exit strategies in the building, particularly the main entrance where you get the most visitors and access to the building. So step 1 and one critical element of all the buildings is to basically reinforce the main entries and create an entry sequence that's secure, that has a check-in and allows for safe exiting of the building as well. The other thing to point out is that the district has engaged with and continues a partnership with some security experts who have done an overall assessment within the district. That conversation will continue to happen and will be an additive process and a continuance of what we're going to be doing on the physical building side of things, and includes the district policies, procedures, ongoing training, and in particular importance now is the emergency preparedness plans for first responders, the district communications, and so on, which were a big part of those public discussions as well as conversations with these particular security experts. The other part of it, and this is a similar goal that we had with the capital project that we're in right now, is to propose work that has a minimal tax impact overall on the district. So where we are in the schedule of this is that we're proposing right now to vote a capital project for the security infrastructure work as part of the budget, which will be with the budget vote on May 21st. We are, looking at that point to then enter into the design process, which would take us through documents and submission to SED later this year. I know we've had a lot of conversations with the board, particularly with the current project. If we were to do work next summer of 2020, we would absolutely need to enter into the expedited review process. I know that's kind of a touchy subject, but the wait period right now at SED is 8 to 9 months. There was absolutely no way we would get this project out to do any work next summer under the normal process. So I wish I had better news on that front, but that's where we're at with that. So with the expedited review, we bid it in the springtime, and then construction would happen similar to what we're doing now over multiple phases of work in a 2-summer period. One of the key elements of this work, which we'll see in a second, is work associated with kind of reinforcing storefronts, entry systems, glazing, and doors. They have long lead times, so even if in a wonderful world, we wouldn't be able to get the materials on site for the first summer for some of the work anyway. So we absolutely need that 2-summer sequence. And then some of the details associated with that will be worked out as we get into the actual scope of the project. So you're going to see some common themes with each of the buildings. The first is always going to be the office kind of entry sequence in a secure vestibule. So starting with Brewerton Elementary, which happens to be the trickiest of the buildings to accomplish this. For those of you who are familiar with Brewerton Elementary, the main office is set back from where the main entry sequence is. And so to be able to get a secure vestibule, we actually have to put a small addition on that allows that to happen back at where the sidewalk is. And this would be a secure area with multiple locking points and then a check-in point that would then allow or not allow access to the rest of the building. So and we'll see this at all the buildings, but generally this type of sequence allows for people that are just dropping off books or a lunch or other things to happen without actual entry into the school. So it really cuts down a lot of the traffic that potentially, you have people wandering around and not know where they're supposed to be going. The other part of many of the building work is interior door replacements. Some of the doors are not really secure because of the nature of how old they are. We're going to be doing door hardware replacement at Brewerton Elementary, which we're going to be doing at the other buildings. One thing about the hardware replacement on the doors is to allow for secure lockdown inside of the classrooms versus a teacher having to go outside to lock the door. And so that's also part of those elements. Exterior door replacements, and then security and ballistic filming of glazing on many of the glazed surfaces. Hastings Mallory kind of follows Brewerton with the entry sequences, but is one of the easier ones to accommodate because there's already a vestibule at the front of the building. And so what we're going to do is cut in a secure area that comes off of that vestibule and then into the office area. So we don't have to do any extensive work there other than adding a few doors and then cutting a door in for the office area. At this school, we're going to also be doing interior door and hardware replacements, exterior door, the glazing and film, and then we also have window replacement as part of this project as well. A. Cole Elementary. The secure vestibule here, there's an existing outside canopy that's pretty significant. We can utilize that, restructure it, and then create a separate exit-only vestibule and then an entry-only secure vestibule into the office area. So in many cases, most of this work is not too difficult to accomplish with some reconfiguration of the offices and adding some doors.
Kurt, excuse me, when you speak of window replacement, are you speaking of window replacement just in the vestibule areas?
No, when we talk specifically about window replacement, it's of windows in the school.
So on like the ground floor and everything?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Millard Hawk Elementary, we also have a canopy, but that canopy is associated only with an existing pair of doors. So we create an exit vestibule there and then a side entry that would bring you right into the office off to the side of that. And again, we've got interior door and hardware replacements, exterior door, and ballistic glazing film. And then at Millard Hawk, we're doing some of the windows as part of the current capital project, and this will continue and finish the window replacement at that building.
If you don't mind, I'll ask you
Please do.
a question. So if you can go back to the previous slide, with the ballistic glazing film, if we are doing new windows, is there not a cheaper, more efficient way? Like they don't come with it already on it? Is there any cost savings to doing that? Or
No, so the nice thing about the window replacement is that the filming can be done in the factory. And yes, it's not only a savings, but it's a better installation.
okay.
Yeah, so with the new windows, that's ideal because that can be done in a controlled situation with the windows as they're being glazed versus after the fact.
Thanks.
CSI, we tried to minimize the work here, given the unknown nature of kind of future of what we're going to be doing with CSI, but still to accomplish it, there's a little vestibule, again, similar to the previous example, that we're going to create off to the side of the main entry area, and then actually create an exit vestibule, because right now there's just those doors and that single window wall. And there's a lot of glazing along that front, so that would all be filmed as well. The middle school has kind of an interesting situation with that kind of deep entry-exit vestibule that exists. And one of the difficulties with the middle school is that the office area as it currently exists is kind of remote from the main entrance. And so what we would need to do there is actually an adjacent room that has some flexibility off to the side, create in one of those bays an exit vestibule that still maintains the exits out of the existing building, so that entry into the building would be into this space and then secure all the way back into the building. So, and then in each of these cases, there's even the opportunity to install or program in a transaction window, so that, again, you don't need to actually have people entering into the office area if they just need to drop something off or, provide a permission slip or something for a student.
I'm assuming that all this would be, like those front exit doors would be opened up for the students to come and go during the rush in the morning versus trying to filter through the vestibules?
Oh, yeah, of course. So the policy side of this gets into the monitoring of when the students are arriving and exiting the building. So what most normally happens, the secure vestibules are an access point for visitors only. It's not access and entry or exit for students. So the students would continue to come in and out of the main doors monitored by teachers during those kind of peak times.
Enough said, thank you.
Yeah. And then with the high school, what we have here is another example of something that just requires kind of a reconfiguration of what you have right now. And you can actually look at this when you leave tonight. But there's an old brick, not old, the original brick building wall on both sides. Right now the doors are back in kind of this plane. So what we would do is pull out the entry doors for the secure vestibule, recess by doing that the exit doors so they're kind of remote and off kind of the visual path, and you still maintain all what you have right now, which is kind of a reconfiguration of that. So you enter into the secure vestibule, and then you can enter into the office area, which would have to be reconfigured to allow that to happen.
For just a question, for that, I'm assuming that's the entrance that most of us walked in tonight.
Correct.
So that would no longer be a student entrance?
No, it would, because you could still, during peak times, you could still maintain these same sets of doors in and out of the building. And then at some point when that is over, you would then go back to just an exit only and a visitor entry. Yep. And a lot of these changes at other schools that we've done this work with are related to teaching the parents as part of kind of orientation of kind of how we operate. If you need to get something to your student, this is what you're going to do. And so some of it is training and policies and some other things. But for the most part, what we find is the actual reconfiguration is happening is not too dramatically different than what the students are used to anyways, because for them, it's not going to be any different than what they have experienced so far for the most part.
Kurt, what's the criteria? I was surprised to see no windows. I guess I'm focused on windows tonight, so I'm sorry about that. At the high school, like especially down the math, the lower levels,
You mean window replacement?
window replacement.
Yeah, so again, it's part of that prioritized list of the windows that are in the current proposed capital project that we pushed into the security project were prioritized based on the condition and age of the windows.
So are there windows in the current project in the high school?
Not new windows, we're getting glazing film on the windows.
In the high school?
Yes,
Hence, we're not getting them here, is what you're
correct.
saying.
Yep.
Got it.
Yep.
But just so Tim, so you know, so.
And it's kind of a twofer for elementary, because the windows are so old. So it's a twofer, it's replacing them, but it's also putting the glaze for the windows here at the high school that were fine. We don't need to replace them, we just need to glaze them.
Correct.
One quick question,
Yeah.
just my brain. The doors to your secure area there.
Uh-huh.
I noticed one is the way I would expect it to be, which is if the door is, you can't push easily against it, right? You have to pull, which is harder to do. Whereas the second one, where you first enter into that area, is a push. Is there a reason for that? Is that law, or is that?
Well, we have to maintain safe exiting out of the building, and so we can't change that. So in case of the main exit doors of the building as they exist now, we can't reconfigure those. So those always have to open out in the direction to travel. This-
Yeah, that
Yeah.
one.
So this entry is locked typically and can only be opened when you're buzzed in. And so it really doesn't matter which direction it flows, because the other point is that this door is also locked. So even if somebody were able to get into this door, they still wouldn't be able to get into the school because these other doors are locked. And
Right, because that one up there is harder to push through per se.
correct.
Okay.
Yeah, but they'll all be locked, and you'll have to be given access to enter into the school building. So the proposed project summary for each of these buildings has been looked at by the architectural team as well as the construction manager. And so these have been looked at based on the scope of work, the volume of glazing and windows, as well as what we need to do to accomplish all of the scope. So it's broken down based on those estimates by building. These are project costs, so these are total costs, which add up to just shy of about $12 million for all of that work. If we were to say to you today, under the best of circumstances, we would recommend that you do all of this work based on all the conversations that we have. But we still have choices. So the next part of that is Maureen and King, as well as your fiscal advisors, took that information and ran some projected costs of tax impact for this project based on those numbers that I just showed. And there's two scenarios, which I'm going to do my best to explain without getting too complicated. But the worst case scenario with a $11,790,000 project is that the tax impact would be 21 cents per thousand, or $21 on 100,000 assessed property. So that's if everything kind of stays the way it is right now. There's another scenario that unfortunately has to do with some negotiations with SED. This is where it gets a little complicated. Because we have a capital project that's going on right now, there's a series of costs that have been attributed to almost all the buildings in the district for those capital projects. SED allows kind of a maximum threshold that they'll aid at any one given period of time at a building. You can do many projects at a building, but if it exceeds that maximum cost allowance, then the district starts to pay for it potentially without the aid implications. Okay? We have a situation at only one building, and it's Millard Hawk, and it's because Millard Hawk is getting the most extensive of work in the current capital project. And so there's we've actually are very close to the maximum cost allowance for just that building. However, the costs of the project to date have been much less than what we anticipated when we submitted it to SED a year and a half ago. So that's all very good. The problem is there's not an elegant way to deal with SED for things that come in a lot less than what you anticipated when you were proposing what the costs were at the submission process. So we have, in the past, in these kind of odd situations, we've gone back to SAD and submitted revised forms. And in theory, if they allow us to do that again, which we will sort out in the next month, then the tax impact would be 11 cents per thousand, and that would be $11 a year. So it's not easy for me to explain it much better than that, and we can get into a lot more depth possibly in the future of that, but you know, it's just the way that the system works in terms of how much they'll aid at times when multiple projects are going on.
So what would your thoughts be? We have a legislative forum up at the city Posties campus on Saturday. Is there anything we can try to lobby our elected officials to assist with that scenario you were talking about? Reality is all of our elected officials are saying safety and security is their number one priority, and yet we have these rules that are possibly putting limitations on what we can do.
Yeah, I wish there was a magic way that we could deal with this, and sometimes elected officials can make some headway with some of these things. These are rules that have been in place for a very long time. So Maureen and I and Tom wanted to make sure we were just very transparent about where we are right now. I feel very positive that we, you know, with further discussions with SED, we'll get to the right spot. But before we go out to the voters of the district, we want to make sure that that's a guarantee. So I'll hesitate to say there's not much others can do, but I think if we kind of stick to it, we'll get where we want to be. So what's next? We have time. Really, this is the kind of first presentation to say here we are with the scope. We expect that there will be questions, and so we have the month of February to engage with the board on what those might be. Any comments, any other concerns that we might want to incorporate, we can get that done. With the main goal of kind of the end date where action must be taken is March 25th. At that board meeting, we will have to, at the very latest, do a secret resolution and set the referendum for the cost and the date. That gives us that 45-day time frame to the May 21st vote date. Public forums will be determined, and as I mentioned before, the vote date on the 21st. So that's where we're at.
So realizing that you probably don't have this number off the top of your head, and by the way, I'll start with, are we set, is King set to be at our next meeting? Or that if possible, executive session?
So that's what we were gonna talk now about. Did we say which February meeting worked for them?
The second one.
The second meeting. Okay. So the second meeting in February, we will have executive session where we can talk about the safety and security things.
Okay, in that case, I won't even bore you with the other question. I'll email it through Tom, just breaking down some of what we just covered, and that way we can, have a discussion.
Yeah, if we can be better prepared for that meeting, if you can send us that stuff ahead of time, that'd be great.
Great
Yeah.
job. Oh, sorry.
Well, I just have 2 points. One is for the board. I mean, I talked about it before, but I'd like to have a long-term look at CSI. What's the long-term goal for that building? So if we're going to be putting a bunch of money presented to the board, so we have a clear understanding of what the 5-year, 10-year, 15 plan is for that building before we start sticking a bunch of money into it. It's planned out, and we're doing it. It's fantastic. And second, for King, when we're talking about what I'd like to know is we're going to do A, and that's going to affect the risk and have it defined by risk as far as what we're doing this because we're going to mitigate this type of risk as far as it goes, because the security is great. You can't do everything at once. So if the risk is to restrict public inside the building, right? Because we want to reduce that, then that would be one risk. If we're going to, another risk would be, we want to ensure that nobody enters the building with a weapon. You know, that would require screening, magnetometer, X-ray equipment. So, what are you trying to mitigate with the work that's being done? It should equate as far as this is what we're going to do. This is the risk that we intend on reducing, and this is the reason why we're doing it.
Correct. Yep. And that goes back to the dovetail element of this is the security expert assessment and how, you know, there's going to be different prioritized levels. I mean, we deal with the built environment piece of it, but it absolutely fits in and has to be coordinated with the other elements to make sure that we've mitigated the risk that we think we can most effectively mitigate at this point in time.
Yeah. Which, like when we had the building condition survey from not that many years ago, it was 135 million, we had to come down to 41 million. But to the first point, so I want to go on record again to say, so CSI, our plan with that, and Michelle Lanya, our new head of special ed, is going to play a key role because she came from BOCES where they built the program, is to be able to, looking at the cost of some of these programs over there, for us to be able to have our own, hiring our own teachers to be able to do that. I've always said before, if the threshold, if the delta between our teachers and us paying, you know, retirement and benefits and retirement, now all of a sudden we'll say it's more feasible, because at the end of the day, the old mindset was, well, we're not paying, well, we still are paying 20% of the Arwada of the retirement of city BOCES workers too. So, but that's just one part, is the financial part, but the other part is that these students will feel more part of our community if they're in our district, as opposed to getting some of these special ed services that are very costly out of the district. But the plan is to look at special ed programming. But that's something that I've tasked Michelle, is for her to put something together. Now, I don't think you've even been here 30 days yet so far, but her plan is to really build that out, to get a cost breakdown of all those programs for city BOCES, but then also what those programs would look like. But to your point, what's it going to look like 3 years, 5 years, 10 years out?
Well, yeah, because infrastructure rise, right? Because when you looked at BOCES, you could lease the space, but then you found that the power wasn't going to be there to supply it, so you'd have to redo the power. You know, are you going to have air conditioning in the building, split units? I mean, what kind of programs do you have, and then what's the infrastructure that's going to be required of the building, and do we have the money to support the programs? And it should all make sense.
Well, we're never going to replicate what BOCES were like with the welding, or specific high needs where it has to be air conditioned everyone. But there's a lot of programs we're sending our kids to paying it that don't have those conditions over there. So if we can replicate that, but I have a lot of confidence in her experience from actually working over city BOCES on what we can replicate here, not only for a cost savings, but also giving those students in Central Square that sense of community. And I go on record again to say, I've got an autistic child, and I would like to, the best scenario is that they can replicate that program within the district, as opposed to putting them in a different program out of the district where they don't really feel like they're part of the district. So if we can do that here, that's a home run on both sides.
Okay, look forward to it.
Yeah, so the last part of this, I just want to segue over to Amanda, who's just going to give you a quick update on the current capital project that's getting close to bidding.
Thank you. Good evening. We're talking about the next project, but I wanted to update you on the current project, which is phase 2 of the project. We have full SED approval as of a couple of weeks ago, which is a great thing. We are finishing up documents, and they will be on the street later this week, early next week for bidding. So that'll be about a month, and then we will be opening bids at the end of next month. So that is the update there. There was a sheet in your packet just to give you a quick update on how things have changed. I will note there is one thing that has been added to the phase 2 capital project, and that is.
Well, I'm sorry, Maureen, does everybody have?
I don't think so, because it wasn't online.
Can we bring it up so you can see it, and we'll get you a copy of it?
It's the same one you had like about a month ago, with a couple of lines added to it.
So this is just an update that we wanted to provide you. As Maureen mentioned, a lot of this you've seen previously, but there was a couple of things that we wanted to note that were added. And the first thing is at Millard Hawk, we added some exterior wall panels to the project. About a month ago, we were notified from Paul and his staff, Mr. Bursett and his staff, that they were doing some routine maintenance in the lower level of Hawk, and they had pulled some casework away from the wall, and there was actually water coming into the wall cavity. So we got together with the administrative team and had that discussion, and we are replacing the windows as part of the capital project. And if we go ahead and replace those windows and leave the wall panels where we are pretty sure that water is getting in, it will not help the infrastructure of the building. So our suggestion was that along with replacing the windows, that we also replace the exterior walls, stucco panels in portions of that building. So that's the addition that you see. And Kirk mentioned that the windows have been moved at Hastings Mallory and at Cole to the security project. That was for a couple of reasons. The first being we had to add the wall panels to Hawk, which we thought was really necessary because it didn't make sense to replace the windows and not those wall panels. And two, we are finding with the current bidding conditions and the number of projects that are currently on the street, we're trying to make this project as simple and easy as possible, and some of those windows were alternates, and we've been getting a lot of feedback from contractors that projects with a lot of alternates are not as favorable as ones that are more simple. The thought being is if it gets too complicated, they're simply, and we've had this experience with other clients, they're simply putting them down and going on to the next project, which is not what we want. We want as many bidders as absolutely possible to bid our projects. So we, with the opportunity with the security project, we, along with Turner, have made the recommendation to reduce the number of alternates we have in this project. If the bids do in fact come back favorably and there's additional money, then we'll go back out for essentially a phase 3 for those windows, which would give us more room in the security project to do other things. Does anybody have any questions about that?
Can you clarify, what's the deduct on the gym floor and the remaining gym work?
So we have added deduct alternates essentially to protect the budget. So if for some reason the bids don't come back favorably, that essentially allows you to look at those as deducting them from the contract, and we don't have to go back out on the street again to rebid. It's essentially
So for the public to be clear, they're still doing the work?
correct.
Okay.
So if for some reason the bids come back higher than we expect,
Yep.
it still gives you opportunity to accept those
Thank you.
bidders, of course.
Because we can't exceed that 41 million.
We're just trying to protect the budget.
Thank you.
Are there any questions or concerns?
Age?
No, thanks for the update.
Sure, and if you do have any questions, of course let us know.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. All right, so as we mentioned, so we'll have King back at our second February meeting. I think what I'd ask is if we can just, I'll send something out to the board, if we can just consolidate all our questions by the next meeting. And that'll give King 2 weeks to then kind of prepare for those. Is that good timing?
That's right.
All right. So we'll do that by, I don't know what that date is, February 7th or 11th?
February 11th.
Thank you, Mr. McCarthy. So by February 11th, and then we'll get it over to King. And now, yep, Mr. Cobupo will have a presentation on 3-year projections and long-range planning.
Projected revenue first.
All right.
Do you always have this effect on the crowd?
I do. Thank you. All right, so projected revenue, 2019-20 budget. So
What I didn't want to do is I didn't want to assume that everybody up here for the board, this is your meeting, or people in the audience, or people watching this, just assume they knew what Foundation Aid entails. And it is pretty convoluted. It's not a quick little answer on what Foundation Aid is, but I have something that will kind of give you a better idea of what that is. So, on January 15, Governor Cuomo presented his proposal for the 2019-20 state budget. Governor is proposing a total of $27.7 billion in state support for public schools. This represents a year-to-year increase of $956 million, which is a 3.58% increase, as compared to the approved 2018-19 budget. The total increase represents a $749 million increase in formula aids. So when people look at this, first thing they say is, wow, this is great. Look at the money that they're getting. When really, the way you have to look at this is, they're moving money from somewhere to get it. The fact that there's going to be new money really isn't the case, but the big part's going to come down to the Foundation Aid. So as we look at the bottom, the big number is the $956 million. Okay, so as we just said, I want to take a second just to explain Foundation Aid. So, well, the public is basically, in 1993, an advocacy group, the Campaign of Fiscal Equity, the CFE, sued the state of New York for contending that the New York City public schools did not provide students with a sound basic education, as the courts have specified is required by the state constitution. Because they did not receive sufficient funding, in 2003, the courts of appeals ruled that the CFE, in the CFE's favor. State leaders subsequently adopted the State Education Budget and Reform Act of 2007 to increase school aid over 4 years by $7 billion annually, including $3.2 billion for New York City. Here's the big part. So as part of this legislation, 30 aid programs were consolidated into Foundation Aid, with the goal of better targeting the money to school districts lacking sufficient financial resources. And that the year it was instituted, the school year was 2007 and 8, but as you remember, 2008, there was the recession, the Great Recession of 2008. So really, it was the school year 2016-17, the school aid totals were $24.3 billion, of which Foundation Aid was $16.5 billion. So that's where the whole Foundation Aid really kind of comes into play. It goes back as early as a court case in 1993. But again, what I sent the board earlier today, you can click on the different school districts in New York State and it shows you. So it is kind of common sense. We get, you're going to see in here, the bulk of our money comes from state aid. We were at a, I want to say, 4 designation when it comes to the socioeconomic status. If you look at like a Skaneateles, it was a 10, like Fable Manly is high as well. So they're going to get, we'll take Skaneateles, perfect example. The bulk of the money they get is from property tax, and it's not from state aid, the Foundation Aid, where we're flip-flop on that. So it is really important that we do, receive Foundation Aid, because it is imperative for districts like ours.
Hey, Tom.
Yeah.
Just 2 notes on that for everyone here in the board is, number one, that, can you go back to that previous slide? The $956 million or whatever it is?
Yeah.
That's less than half of what the Board of Regents said that our public education system needed just to maintain or provide adequate education for students. And to me, the most interesting part about that is that it's not like us who are elected. Board of Regents is, for the most part, I mean, it's an insider thing. You're picked through a process by the people that we've elected. So they put these people in place and then ignore what they say and provide us this. That's number one. And number 2 is it doesn't, the $956 million does not even keep pace with rate of inflation. So however they spin it, it's going to end up being a net decline for us.
Right, correct. And the 2 big numbers that we need to look at are the first 2, the Foundation Aid and the expense-based aids. The expense-based aids, that's great if we get our capital project, our phase 1 and phase 2 that are done in a timely manner. Then we'll actually see that. Because if we don't, then that's just a $411 million on paper. It looks really good. So it is very deceiving. That's why if someone just were to look at this at face value, they'd say, wow, that's awesome. You got to get in. The devil's in the details. So as we look right here, some of the big things that I want you to take from this is, again, it's published. That was the first state run that we had not that long ago. When they pull the 2019-20 amounts, they pull a current 2018 amount based on what is currently in each of the categories. And that's basically, so if you take a look at 2019-20, at next year's proposed budget, we're trying to compare basically apples to apples here. So the delta between the two is the differing actual amount that is currently in our 2018-19 budget. Okay, so we have some definite things we want to focus on this slide right here. So first and foremost, we want to take, this is compared to the actual adopted budget, which is more, as I said, apples to apples. Notice the column 2019-20. This is the same as the executive run from the last slide. But, as I said, this is compared to the actual adopted budget from last year. Our big increase, so you want to look over at the 1,287,501. So our big increase in building aid is because of our new capital project, and it's estimated that it will be coming it'll be coming on next year. We need, and then another note, we need to complete the project phase 1 to actually be able to see that aid. And that's what I talked about a little while ago when it showed the $411 million. We're really only going to see that if we actually complete it. So it is very important, as you heard from the last presentation, that we move along in a timely manner. So when it comes down to that third party, we're absolutely going to do that because we can't afford to wait 9 or 10 months to get in the queue. Something else I want you to take a look at, the only amount that is a true number instead of an estimate is the foundation aid. And I kind of talked a little bit about our foundation aid. But if you take out building aid, it is, as you see in the bottom, it is a 3.68%. So it's not the 6.54 that looks right there. You can't see because it's kind of dark. But literally, when you take out building aid that we're banking on, it is 3.68. If you look at the expenses where it says total expense based aid, similar to what I said last year at this time, software, library, textbook, hardware, technology, universal pre-K, these are always going to be decreasing because we have a declining enrollment. So all of the schools in our county, for where it says total expense based aids, those are all declining. Okay, so for right here, I want to refer to, I've got a document that kind of goes into a little bit greater detail, but the governor's initiatives, there have been a lot of initiatives that he's put out, but the school aid growth cap, the APPR, what I will say right now is that will not be connected to student scores. So that actually is a positive. School bus cameras and fines for passing buses. State deadline for school level reporting, school district designated to submit equity plans. So right now in Oswego County, it's us and Fulton that are doing this right now. We don't really know how that's going to play out because we don't have anything to compare it to. But so right now, we're going to be able to have a breakdown by building of the equity of the money that's going into it. And I said last year when we knew we were going to put on that list, Hastings will obviously be skewed because of the foundations program that is there. So obviously we know right now with such a huge costly special ed program that's definitely going to show higher. Simplifying expense-based aids,
and the basic star exemption eligibility has changed. So now I do have a document. What I will do is I will forward this to the board, and it kind of gives a breakdown for each of those in greater detail. So I'll just send that to you. Unless any one of you wants to point to something up there, I can go to greater detail right now, or I can just send it to you. Send it to you? Okay. So again, I couldn't agree more. So this is Tim Creamer. This is the executive director for school boards in New York State. And again, I don't want to sit and read off of this, but I couldn't agree more with the things that with what he's saying, and also to piggyback what Andy just said just a little while ago, that if you get past some of the things that are a little bit deceiving and you really look at it, we to be able to run our districts efficiently and safely, we need to be able to lobby, but we need to look at what this gentleman is saying right here. So what can we do? We have the legislative forum. We who should attend? You know, what's the format, and how should we prepare? I think that something that this district has always done pretty well is working with CSDA when it comes to what do we both look. So how are we all on the same page in our lobbying process? So when you got the school boards lobbying, you got the districts, you've got the teachers. It's really important that we look at a very similar message. So Saturday, February 2nd at City BOCES, I will be there, 9 a.m. To 11 p.m.
Yeah, and an email came out today. I'm not sure, do you happen to recall what the deadline is? I know they were saying they were still accepting reservations for this, but and I don't know if anyone else is able to attend. I know Tom and I are attending, but I'm not sure. It's always a crapshoot what representatives show up. So because last year, who was it that backed out last second? And
I think they all did, didn't they? I don't think that there was.
No.
that may have been a leading
Well,
question.
Barkley was there.
Well, yeah, Barkley was there.
Yeah.
Patty Ritchie did.
Was not.
Yeah,
Patty Ritchie. Yeah.
Yeah.
The scary thing this year is all branches have transitioned to his power like him. That's what's really scary. So I don't know how much success we're going to have. We certainly can try, but this budget is a scam. It's a scam. And there's no other way to put it. And until this, I've said it every year and I'll continue to say it. And I know he might be watching me, but I really don't care. Until this state wakes up, it's decimating the hell out of this state. And people are not moving out because of the weather. People are moving out because of high taxes and pathetic leadership down in Albany. Period. End of statement.
We continue to vote for these idiots.
Couldn't agree more.
Do we go to the next presentation? About those Patriots, no?
I bet you're rethinking putting his picture in the presentation.
Great job, Pearl, if you're watching from home.
Hey, Tim. The only thing I can say, Tim, is I'm just hearing confirmation that if you want it screwed up, give it to the government to do.
All right, so we have the 3-year projections. And again, this is a requirement by law that to present forecasting budget planning. So tonight we are going to do exactly what we've done in the last couple of years that I've been superintendent, and that is the going out a 3-year budget. I don't really feel that it's really responsible to go beyond 3 years because things change so much that if you go out 4 or 5 years, I don't want people to say, wow, that's not how you said it 3 or 4 years ago, because things change so much in that whole unknown. But we feel that within 3-year periods, increments, it's a lot more accurate. So here are the 2017-18 actual revenues and expenditures. So again, for the visual learners that we have, it's basically the same information that was on the last slide. We are one of those districts where this state aid makes up the bulk of our revenues. I just talked about that a little while ago. This is
One of the reasons why we were selected to be part of that transparency reporting in year one, it was us and Fulton. It's because we get so much from state aid, but also because we have 4 or more school buildings, is why we were selected. I should have mentioned that before. If you were wondering why was it us and Fulton, that was really the 2 main criteria points, is that we do get a substantial amount of money in state aid, and the other part is we have 4 or more school buildings, where other schools in our county do not. Well, I mean, they get aid, but they don't have the buildings. So, if you take a look right here, we see the salary and benefits will always make up the bulk of our expenditures. That is never going to change. That will always be the case. So this is the same revenue and expenditure information from the last slide, but this represents the current 2018-19 budget. So as you see, there's basically no change in the revenues or in the expenditures. Here is the summary of the last few slides. It's the actual against the 2017-18 actual budget. So we're going actual to actual so you can get apples to apples. This is how the comptroller suggests that we do our projections. TRS is projected to go down because the market is performing well, so that's a positive right there. So again, TRS is the teacher retirement system, where the bulk, I would say 3/4 of our, 750 employees? The bulk of our employees are in our TRS. Estimates, of course, so as I had said, the bulk of the payroll is in the TRS system. ERS, basically everybody else that aren't in TRS, and that projection is where the rest of our staff is, and we have not been given these estimates yet. So as you know, we went into the Central New York Healthcare Consortium. We knew that it was going to happen, but there was going to be a 7% increase. It's one of those things, you got to kind of weigh both sides. If we were fully funded, or self-funded, and we had some major cases in the district, it could substantially, you're taking a gamble. It had worked for us, there's no doubt about it. But one of the reasons why we went into the healthcare consortium was that we would be able to do better at long-term planning. Again, with that saying that when we went from the retrospective plan to the minimum premium, it definitely was in our favor, and that's how we were able to definitely see some savings. Okay, so here are the constants, or if you want to refer to that as the assumptions that we are using. As you see, state aid. It's very important that you direct your attention to year one, where it says 2% plus the $1.2 million in building aid. So where we saw before, we had substantially more money in our district because of our capital projects and our building aid. So year one was a 1.2 million building aid. Year two, it was the 2% plus the 1.7 million in building aid. And then by year three, it was just the 2% because it was assumed that we weren't going to be we would be done with our capital projects. Very similar to what you heard Kirk say. So with this slide right here, some of the key things I want you to look at. So the 5.61% and then the 6% are way more than we would normally experience. And that is a result of the capital project and our corresponding debt that will pay for that capital project. So, sorry, saying that, I didn't slide that over. So see the 5 point at the bottom of the 2019-20, bring it all the way down, percent of change to 5.61 and the 6%. That's why those numbers were higher. And again, it's all related to the capital project and the corresponding debt. So this is the first projection. If it's a 2%, that would not be good for the district. So every year I show you the different percentages. This would not be good. if you look at the bottom and you see that the 2020, 2021 would be in the whole $3,101,107. Would not be where we just can't do it. So the state aid at 3%, and as you know right now, the first runs came out at about 3.8%. So if this were going to be at 3%, it's basically taking a look. It's hurting us, not as much as the 2%, but it's still not where we want to be. And then here you see the state aid at 4%. So a lot depends on the project phase 1 and phase 2 being completed on time, so we can generate the estimated building aid of the 2.5 million. So that's kind of the common theme that started on the first slide when it showed the 411 million, because a lot of that comes back to only really seeing that money and having that actually be actual if we get the work done.
What's the delta on 4% there, Tom? What's the bottom line?
I'll go back,
I
sorry.
can't see that. On the first year, what's the delta?
So in the first year, are you talking about for 1920, it was 662,974. For 2020, 2021 was 1,224,437. So it was substantially different, improved from the 2% and the 3%. Okay, now we slide into, we've been using Forecast 5, so I was going to have Maureen come up if you wanted to show the slides for this part here so you hear a different voice.
So while she's coming up, I'll give, well, whoever, but I'm guessing probably Maureen props. No, if you compare projections in this year compared to projections that were presented to us last year, I mean, there's slight variations from one year to the other, but there, I mean, it seems to be a really good pattern, so kudos to you. And I know it's nothing more than a shot in the dark, but pretty consistent, pretty good.
No, I mean, this was all me. She did. In fairness to Maureen, she could definitely teach a college course on this right here. There's no doubt. She gets calls from other business managers all the time.
Yeah, to your point, Andy, 4% is doable for us over the next couple of years. When you're looking at those deltas of 600,000, $1.2 million, that's a 1%. We can work with a 1% shift. It's when you're getting into those 2 and 3 millions, when you're projecting out, or you're getting 2% aid. That's a lot more work for us. That's cutting versus working on keeping the programming that we have. I know we like Forecast 5, so I pulled some of the pieces that come out of that system because that's what you guys have been looking at the last year. We already have the Forecast 5, so we have a lot of budget information that we can get out of there. It's very similar to the budget information that you see because all of our pieces are put together out of the same sources of same categories of budget codes. So they're going to be pulling it the same way that we pull it out of our own financial statements. The general fund revenues by source, I think it's basically the same as the pie graphs. The blues are the property taxes and the red is the state aid. So you can see that the property taxes are not rising very much due to the implementing the property tax cap. Showing the same data as a percentage in a bar graph, again, looking at the state aid versus the property taxes. We really only have those two sources of income. This is the actual property taxes, and it's broken up between the star. And the blue is what we collect, the star is what comes through to us as taxes from the state. These are expenditures, and you can see general support, instruction, transportation, employee benefits, debt and interfund transfers. We discuss those together when we discuss it in our pie graphs. But basically, the green and the yellow is the same as what we show in our graphs, employee salaries and benefits.
So question on this one is, not for tonight, but down the road, is that, if you can go back to that one, is this something that forecast 5 where we can take this and change it to percentage and then say, how's that compared to, 20 other comparable sized districts? And all that?
Yes.
All right, awesome.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, they're going to be almost exactly the same. That's one of the things. The revenue side is where you see the differences. There, if you are a district that has higher wealth, you're going to have less state aid, more property taxes. So you see the graph differently on the revenue side, but on the expenditure side, it's very similar.
As a percentage.
Yes, as a percentage, correct. And this is our trending from year to year. So you're looking at 2013 up through 18, which it's a budget year we're in now, and then 19 and 20 are projections based on numbers that I put into the formulas. So as you can see, we don't change much. It seems like we do a lot and make a lot of changes every year, but it really doesn't change. I always say it's like almost like a cruise ship. It really is hard to move it off its course.
Yeah, because what's the difference between 2013 and 2020 in percentage? Do you know? I went to Central Square, so I can't really figure it out on my own.
It's which one?
Well,
Are you looking
the
at?
point I'm trying to make is that it doesn't seem like there is a big percentage increase from year to year. So
No, there isn't.
2013, 2020, you might have had a 5 or 6% increase,
Right.
which isn't a lot in my business. And what I do, I give 3% every year to everything.
Mm-hmm.
Where I'm not seeing that here. I'm seeing a lot less than that. So to me, it shows a lot of.
Yeah, we've made a lot of, state aid has been flat for years. And with the property tax cap, you're looking at, we call it 2%, but whatever that formula comes out to be. So remember, through these years, we've done a lot of work to keep this going. We've got buildings closed. We've reformulated how we've structured the buildings. We've done a lot to keep ourselves moving without a lot of growth.
Yeah, because to me, this is really a success story in that your cost, your dollars, right? You want to get the biggest bang for the money that comes in, and to me, it's applaudable
Yeah,
to be able to run.
Obviously it was a force because we're forced to go there because of the revenue shortage.
Right.
But on the flip side of that, with our declining enrollment, that's where we've had the room to implement it and stay on track.
Right. Okay. I just wonder how many more magic tricks we have.
Oh, we got 7 buildings, so we got 7 magic tricks.
That's it.
Kitty.
See, yeah.
This is just another look at the expenditure codes by object, which is more along the lines of the way we have to show it a little bit differently for the budget. When we put it out, you know how we have to do the 3 parts? This is the 3-part look at it. We have to do administration, general, instructional, and other. I think it's the transportation. And again, you can see not a lot of change. This is the salary and benefits as a percentage. And you can see on some of the years in 14 and 15, that's where we were closing some buildings and making some cuts. It's not a lot, but that's where we kind of, I guess you would say, stayed even going through these changes. And this is general fund expenditures by the type. Oh, I'm sorry, the benefits by the type. So the green is the health insurance. So you can see where 2 years ago we made our savings by making the change to the minimum premium and then over to the cooperative. That was a big help at that point too. And this is our actual revenues versus expenditures. And in those years, 13, 14, 15, we were just making it. What we were bringing in, we were spending. Some of them were a little bit backwards. We were losing our fund balance a little bit. I think you've seen those presentations that I've made. Last year and this year are the first 2 times that we've actually made forward gains in our fund balance. And then the other two, 19 and 20, those are projections, and you see the $1 million there because we always have an appropriated fund balance of $1 million. So when you put your budgets in there, it's going to be a negative $1 million until the actuals are realized. And then this is the corresponding fund balances. See how they kind of were going down, and then now we've made some gains there. And we've realized in those fund balance gains, we've realized our credit rating has changed and it's improved. So that gives us better percentages for our bonding and will help when we totally ban for the projects.
Do you happen to recall in 2014, what was the committed bucket there? That, I don't know what color it actually is, but it's the last.
Back then, there was no committed. They totally changed the designations for fund balance. That's what, and I actually took away the slide that has all of them because there's like 20 colors, and it doesn't show well.
I can tell you, we
Committed
spent
is
about
new.
5 hours speaking about it one board meeting, I can tell you that for sure, in 2014.
And of course, one of the major pieces that we have to always keep in mind is the declining enrollment.
Is forecast 5 seeing any chance of that declining enrollment changing?
No, they give us, we can run a 5-year projection because obviously there's 5 years worth of birth data up till kindergarten, and it's still declining.
The live birth rate.
Yeah.
I think all kidding aside, had we not made some very tough decisions back in the 14, 15, 13, 14, 15, whatever, we would have really been looking at some serious program cuts, and I think that's important to, I know they were tough decisions, and I don't mean to be facetious about it, but we'd have been dealing with a lot more difficult program cuts throughout the last 5-6 years. So.
And we still will have some benefits coming from the changes we made in the health insurance. The health insurance from this point on is going to go up because of the consortium. They're always going to go up. I mean, the cost of health insurance goes up. But we still have both of those other plans running out. They run for like 2 and 2.5 years out because they're always incurred and obviously. So once those plans technically officially end, we will have some money that comes back from them. So that'll help us in the health year.
Maureen, to that point, is there a clear end date for that? Or could it be 3 years, could it be, it's obviously, if they've had something happen in that old plan, right?
Right. The very old plan is running out now.
Okay.
So I will have a number in this year's budget in the revenue side for that. The next one will run out 18 months after that.
Great job.
Yes, thank you.
So to Mr. McCarthy's point, and not, great job, both Tom and Maureen, and not to end on a downer, but the reality is, when you look at the decline in enrollment, there's no reason to expect any massive changes. If we were to just take the previous 5-year average, I was just asking Mr. Colby for the rough numbers in elementary school. The reality is, in the next 6-7 years, we're losing the equivalent of another elementary school worth of students. Now, that's across all our grades and all that, but so unfortunately, tough decisions haven't stopped. We have to keep staying ahead of that, and which, to Mr. Colby's point of kind of looking at using space in a different way and bringing programs that have been, for good reasons, maybe put elsewhere, bringing them back in-house would be important for us.
Yeah, I don't mean to be a naysayer, but I don't, and I said this the last 4 or 5 years, I unfortunately don't see that enrollment going the other way. I just don't. And I hate to be like that, but I'll tell you, I've talked to a ton of people in this state. It is really getting scary. It is getting scary. And I just can't believe people, I guess I'm stunned. It is really frightening what's happening with population in this state. And how people just kind of go, oh, well, I mean, it's going to affect all of us in a really, 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 both personally and boards and in a really negative way. We've got to get people staying and moving into the state. And I don't mean to go on a, I'll end it there.
No, and it's true. I talk about this every year I've been superintendent.
It's not just New York State.
Where
It's everywhere.
you have the governor clearly pushing an agenda to have countywide school districts, very similar to what other states have done. And in doing that, yeah, I can understand the consolidation of the different things, but then they lose their identity as a district when it gets meshed into an entire county, and then, so I agree.
All right, thank you for that. We'll move into additional reports, unfinished business. Mr. Colarupo, just want to provide an update on our data discussion. Last we talked, we're looking for kind of a date at which Forecast 5, I guess, would be presenting a rough draft or something that we can look at for the data.
Yep, so we have a meeting, Arena, did you say it was February
7th.
February 7th? So then we'll be able to figure a time that they can come here and present not only the things that we gave them, that I talked about before with the data, but to actually just put it up on dashboard and then be able to show us other really important things that we can do. But to your point a little while ago was comparing them to all other districts our size and how other districts have kind of weathered situations.
I know this is not what the board probably wants to hear, but I would suggest that when Forecast 5 is ready to do this, that probably would be a great work session night. Like, I prefer to not do it in the middle of a meeting, because that's going to be a great lengthy discussion. I know Mr. Pat's passionate about that, and we all have good questions, but that might be something where it's just that workshop night only on data, so that it doesn't become a 3-hour tour meeting night. So
I thought maybe you were going to recommend we all move south.
well, talk about that later.
Do it on a separate night, I would recommend that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So if you
yeah,
keep that in mind,
if you look at this piece of paper that was handed to us right before the meeting, right, and you look at, for high schools, New York State's accountability system, variety indicators beyond core academic subjects, you have things that we've talked about, being ready for high school once it becomes available, school suspensions, chronic absentees for all schools, college careers, civil readiness, index of coursework earning technical education. This is really in alignment with what we're talking about. So to me, we could really firm up what we truly want to look at if this is going to be what stuff is going to come down the pike with. I think it will really ease up what's behind it.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Or no?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, yeah.
Right.
It definitely. When I saw it, when I was in, where was it, in Albany, when all the superintendents had to go down there and they talk about all the different components of ESSA, I was just thinking, well, those are the things that we've already been talking about, college career ready, the whole 9 yards.
Right. Yes. So I think we're like almost there.
All right, excellent. So I guess once you meet with Forecast 5, then you can throw out some dates, and we'll have to schedule a work session for that.
Sounds good.
With that, move into other reports. Mrs. Wood, anything?
No?
Excellent. So I have a couple things. Just a reminder, which has been mentioned a couple times, but the City Legislative Forum is this Saturday. And I also wanted to congratulate Kenneth Robard.
Yes.
Recognize Kenneth Robarge, Mark Walzik, and our own Lori Wood, who will be inducted into the Central Square Wall of Distinction. I forget the date of the ceremony right now. March 7th. Thank you. So congratulations. And with that, I'll open it up to the board. We'll start with our student board rep. Hey, nothing for you. Excellent. Rest of the board, any topics you want to bring up before we move into action items?
Oh, yeah, I had one question, I thought, I'm sorry. Main Street, I know that we went through that whole process, picked the best offer, so on and so forth. Have we gotten any movement on that since then? I wasn't here last meeting, so I may have missed something, I apologize.
Oh, the
So,
district.
yeah, the district office, so the closing and when that's set for?
I don't think we have an actual date of closing, but we, I believe, are getting much closer. We were waiting on the title search and the abstract to come back, and I believe that is back. So now it's more logistics than anything else. So we are getting closer.
No, and that's gonna happen. We had a situation where one of the pipes had broken and we contacted the person. He was like, no, that's fine. You know, I didn't know you guys would fix the pipe, so we did that. So he didn't even have to go in to look at it after the fact. So it's pretty trusting. Paul's doing a great job maintaining that. Similar to the Cleveland property, that we finished the assessment. Maureen, was that last week, I believe? They're all jumbling when we sent the assessment numbers. Sorry, the appraisal.
Appraisal for the other building, yes. That was a week ago now.
Right. So then and that's what the DEC just needed to have before they move forward with that, which I guess we'll talk about more when we have our determine what our to be determined date will be, or amount of time will be shortly.
That was a funny sentence.
Thank you.
Determine when are to be determined.
How many times can we use determine in a sentence?
We'll
Go.
determine that.
All right, if there's nothing else from the board, then I'll turn it over to Mr. Colbucco for the superintendent's report. You thought I was going to...
Nope, absolutely not. So, good news for the varsity cheerleaders. On January 22nd, 2019, they took the SCAC League title at Baldwinsville High School. Congratulations to the following Paul D. Moore High School students for earning a seat based on their auditions to perform with the OCMEA Honors Symphonic Orchestra as part of the County Orchestra Festival. Jillian Julian, piccolo. Lily Fitzgerald, French horn. Hannah Zawalski, I'm going to get it right next time. Hannah Zawalski. It's not the glasses. We went with a higher font. It's just the pronunciation. Hannah, I apologize. Zawalski. And Cole Wilson, trumpet. I just came from the senior citizen dinner that the task force put on. Paige Winks was a huge part in that. We had over 100 senior citizens that were down there today having a great time, and that's another testament to our task force, student government kids. And we do have a living legend here in Miss Deb O'Mara. Her daughter does a wonderful job, Miss Erin O'Mara. I just can't say enough about what Deb O'Mara brings to this district. That is my superintendent report.
Excellent, thank you. All right, with that, we'll move into items for discussion and action. The first one we need to discuss before we make a motion. So it's the approval of the renewal with Pyramid Brokerage for the sale of the Cleveland School at 140 Bridge Street. What is in your board packet doesn't have dates in it. Last we discussed this, we had discussed 30-day increments for extensions, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Colbucco with some thoughts on that.
So our thought was, and again, listening to George Lee's feedback, but also coming back and sitting down with Paul and with Maureen and looking at all the things that we have going on right now with the Main Street property and with Cleveland, that we thought that it would just be in our best interest for this one to go with a 2-month rather than, we know they're not going to be done with all the paperwork and all the things from the DEC and then come back and then extend it again. We thought it would be safe to go with a 2-month window.
Make a motion to extend the pyramid contract by 60 days.
Second.
All right, so, 1 second.
Are you looking at the dates?
Yeah, just trying to figure out what we need to do on this form. So for argument's sake, put it out through, let's make it so it works with our meeting schedule. March meeting is 25th, so perfect. So through March 28th, we'll say? All right, so we have a motion and a second to extend through March 28th, and this would be for both buildings. It's not just one
Correct.
building. So, any further discussion on that? All those in favor?
I'll go with it. I'm not thrilled on it, but
Just one afterthought, are we expecting some closure in the next 2 months, at least on the one?
Yes, we
All
are.
right, simple, yes or no?
Yep.
All right, with that, make a motion to approve the, item F2, the approval of the memorandum of agreement for the CSTA retirement incentive. Can I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. McCarthy. We'll open up for discussion. I will say that Mr. Bundy's unable to make the meeting tonight. He did want to express, were he here, he would likely not support it. And he points back to a couple of years ago, we had a long meeting, discussed the retirement incentive we were offering that night, and the fact that we didn't have a desire to do that. My response to Mr. Buddy, and again, we're all entitled to our opinion, but this is a vastly different incentive. It is offering years of service as an incentive, and again, quite frankly, I think it would be financially irresponsible as a district to not do this. But that's the view on that.
And to piggyback, I keep hearing that I don't know if, I'd have to go back on the record, but I don't think we set a specific time frame on when we would do. I do remember stating that we wouldn't do one in the next 2 years. But I want to be clear, from my perspective, I never agreed to 5 or 6 or 10 or 22 years for another one. So.
I would agree with you, except that was my first year on the board, and I'm still here, and I have not been reelected, just to throw it out there.
Yeah,
Yeah, I thought
No,
it was
it-
5 years.
so
Wasn't the motion that?
there was a lot of discussion. It wasn't a motion. So we had discussion, and we kind of
It wasn't on our
worked around the table.
It wasn't.
No.
It was before us.
Right.
Right. I guess my point is, the board changes every year, so it could change. And I guess I'm just, for the public's perspective, I don't think we can say as 9 board members, it's gonna be in another 2 years or 5 years or whatever. And
Right.
Things do change.
Right.
so.
The whole, going back to 2017, we knew we were getting hit hard, and financially, we had people that could retire, and then we wouldn't have to then cut people who would be the newer teachers. So the district had always said every year, technically, there would be a retirement incentive in the fact that if we had 10 teachers, it'd be this much money. It was 10 teachers, morning was at $15,000, and then if it was 20, no, I'm sorry.
$10,000 for 10 or above.
Correct. So-
20,000 for 15.
Right, and so the way that it always was if they could get 10, then it would be that. If they got 15, then it would be the 20,000. But the district never really got those numbers. So it was actually the first time that they actually got those, which was great because we had the 26 retirements. We didn't have to, make the cuts that we thought we were going to have to make. But what was talked about was that type of retirement incentive where each person can get 20 grand. We knew that there was going to be a considerable amount of time, so we wanted to just say it to the public. So for those teachers that thought, I could go this year, but I'll wait till next year and I'll still get that money.
Absolutely.
I didn't want them to feel like, Cal Lupo, you didn't tell me, that was 20 grand I could have used. This retirement incentive started when a couple teachers came to me and with Lynn, and it made sense because what basically what it is they've got 27 years in, 28 years in, and to get to the 30-year threshold in our district, that's when they get the 100% single. So they basically said, look, we're not looking for any of the 10,000 or 20,000, but I can't do individual deals with individual teachers. I have to say anybody that would be eligible. Well, so what we said was, we took just that one part, which was the 5 years towards their 30 years. And there were really only 4 teachers that were actually eligible that had 25 or more years that were able to retire. They had more than 20. Originally, it was just 2 teachers because one of the teachers wasn't sure if she was going to get the 30 years of actually working in New York State, but she did from a different district. So then it actually benefited her instead of having to then come back to our district to just do another year and a half. So for the 3 people that can do it, that have said that they want to do it, if you guys were to approve, it would be about $65,000 in breakage for us. So it's a win-win. 2 out of the 3 are PE teachers, that it's much easier to replace a PE teacher. So that's where we're at.
And we also wanted to get away from, it was really not an incentive if it was every year. It was like,
Exactly.
that's what we were trying to get away from.
Yes.
I just want to be clear.
Yep.
Yeah, and same as I did last time, I will simply say that even though this is a vastly different incentive, not financial, I don't think any of us do, but it's not done lightly. You know, the last thing we want to do is lose our longest tenured employees of the district, so it's not done lightly. But the reality is that as a district, we have tough decisions every year. This helps some of those tough decisions have less of an impact. So with that, any other discussion before we vote on it? All right, all those in favor? All those opposed? All those abstaining?
I can't really decide right now whether I support that, given what we've said in the past.
All right, so one abstention. So the motion does carry. Thank you.
You're doing great, you're hanging in pretty good.
All right, thank you. All right, can I get a motion for item F3, approval of an overnight student trip?
Second.
Motion by Mr. McCarthy, second by Mr. Loy. Discussion on that, I'll simply say this is an exception to our normal rule for the board and everyone else to understand. Board policy gives us a direction of one chaperone per 10 students. It also says that the board can approve variations to that. This is a case where it is more like 15-to-1. It's the DECA competition. The advisors are more than comfortable with that, and it's been done in past years. So, any discussion on this? All those in favor? It's unanimous, thank you. I will make a motion to approve the resolution for polling locations. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. McCarthy. I'll open up discussion because it's really important that we consistently get this out there because it's a massive change. So we have previously gone down to 2 polling locations for the upcoming and for the going forward for our annual budget vote and election for school board. So this is saying that for residents in what would be voting district 1, which is, I get my directions correct, west of Route 81,
Yes.
and living in either, or everyone living west of 81 plus anyone living in Onondaga County, you'd be voting at the Central Square American Legion. And for everyone living east of 81 in Oswego and Oneida counties, you'd be voting at the Constantia VFW on 49. So.
Before we go too far, can we back up just a second? We just noticed that the attachment we have is for Winter Drumline for the student trip, not DECA.
Oh, on your sheets, that's interesting.
So now that we've voted on it and approved it, I'm all good with it.
Well, we haven't approved.
No, yeah, we did.
We did, we approved
The
it.
last one, Andy.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're going back to last one. I
It's
thought you
not
were saying this one.
You said DECA.
It's winter drum.
There's only 25 students.
The one you're talking about will be on the next board packet.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Down to this one.
Yep, my bad. It was the winter drum line, Mr. Goldman. He just sent me the DECA one, so I had that one in my
I
mind.
just wanted to make it known to Andy when I call him to say, I know it says 10-to-1, but he has variation. So.
We need to read the winter.
We need to revote that?
Well, no, so what we were voting on was the item in the packet, even though I misstated it. So we approved that one, barring anyone
Wants to
having any
change their
objections.
mind.
And that is the one that has the 1 to 15 versus the 1 to 10?
No, so the 1 to 15 was DECA.
It is the
That
DECA.
has no relevance at all to the one you just voted on.
Okay.
That one is all legit, it's
But
on.
we know we're good for the next meeting now.
And I'm all good with it either way. I just wanted to clarify, just
Yeah,
because
good.
we'll get somebody questioning. And actually, I have to get credit for do Chance questioning first.
Ms. Dickerson, I'm impressed.
And I got that, never mind. Any discussion on polling locations? All those in favor?
I'm gonna go with this one, even though I'm not real keen on it.
All right.
Atta boy.
Motion passes. Make a recommendation for the approval of F5, the contract extension for the superintendent of schools. Can I get a second? Mr. McCarthy, any discussion?
Andy's for you.
Yes, I made that motion. And Mr. McCarthy will second.
I just think this is a very good thing for the district.
Absolutely.
Thank you, guys.
All those in favor?
Thank you.
Excellent.
Oh, I thought you said something.
Oh, did you raise your hand?
Thank you, and again, I just want to say publicly, I know we put a little preemptive press release out there, but I'm very excited. I think the board should all be excited, and the community should. Mr. Colbufo is now with us for another 5 years, so through January of 2024, and again, it's all foilable. I know he doesn't mind me mentioning this because he's already let me put it in print in a press release, but to take it a 1.5-year extension to get rid of the rumors that he is interested in a recently opened up superintendent slot for no additional salary is a really great thing for the community. So, congratulations.
If you move into the city, I'm going to be suspicious, that's all I'm going to say.
You're able to edit that out, right?
That's all I can do.
Can I get a motion to accept item G in its entirety, our consent agenda?
I'll second.
Mrs. Wood with the motion. Mr. McCarthy, if you haven't developed a theme, with the second. And for the public record, item G1 is acceptance of recommendation for the Committee of Special Education. Item G2 is the approval of disposals and surplus property. Any discussion on that? All those in favor? It is unanimous.
Okay, I want to throw it out there, just so Tim can't do it ahead of me, okay? Can we do H1, 2, and 3 all at once?
Yes.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
So, Mr. Bedworth is making the motion to accept item H in its entirety. Second by Mr. Loyer. Any discussion? All those in favor? It is unanimous. All right, excellent. And with that, I will make a motion that the Central Square School District Board of Education hereby moves into executive session to discuss the annual appraisal, specifically the mid-year feedback of the superintendent.
Second.
Can I get a second? Mr. Loyer. Discussion on this is for the public to know, and that's with no action to follow. This is part of our annual review process. Mr. Colbufo will not be in on this. It's for the board to discuss, and then we'll deliver it to Mr. Colbufo the next meeting. So, any other discussion? All those in favor? It is unanimous. Thanks. Have a good night.